Did you know there's an island in Indonesia where you can hunt people?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Edgier Than Thou. I wasn't really planning on showing my face around here for another little while because I've just kind of been having fun with doing voiceover, but this sort of felt like a talk to the camera type of video. I also wanted my next time talking about Matt Walsh to be about something that was funny terrible and not I want to kill people terrible, but here we are. For those of you who aren't aware, a man recently was shot and killed in Houston, and based on the video footage available to us, it looks as though that person being shot was as justified as it can be. He was waving a gun around in a restaurant. I'm not obviously going to show the footage here. It's very easy to find if for whatever reason you do want to see that. Basically, comes in, waves a gun around, is trying to rob people, and then one particular citizen has a gun on him, shoots him.
Okay, wow, this explanation ended up being kind of wrong. So as it turns out, the robber actually didn't have a real gun. It was some like plastic gun or a BB gun or something to that effect. And I can't tell then exactly what's happening in the footage. It looks like he picks up the robber's gun and then shoots him again with it, but I guess he shot him a ninth time with his own gun. I don't really want to rewatch footage of a fatal shooting to figure that out, and I haven't seen anybody specifically reporting on that beyond Twitter comments, so I don't want to get that wrong. And not that it matters a whole lot to the actual specific facts of the case, but the fact that this person wasn't planning on killing anyone should probably factor into how we talk about them after the fact. Obviously, robbing a place with a fake or real gun is not an acceptable behavior regardless, but it's a very, very different kind of crime than murder or attempted murder, I would say.
Most of the people who've watched that video have found that bit in particular very chilling, because there were already 8 bullets in this person, and I don't really want to get into it a whole lot more, but it should not shock you to realize that after this guy goes home, the police wanted to speak with him. See, there's this really funny thing that happens when a person is shot and killed, where the police like to involve themselves in some way, shape, or form, unless one of them was the one who did it. But Matt Walsh hears this news and responds with the following. What is there to talk about? He handled the problem and went home. Just bury the robber in an unmarked grave and everyone can get back to their lives. Now I know, shocking, right? Matt Walsh having a bad take about something? What is this, opposite world? But that idea on its own is deranged. The idea that there shouldn't be any sort of investigation into a fatal shooting because based on preliminary evidence it appears justified. And it's horrifying to think that in Matt Walsh's world, if footage comes out after you're shot to death that makes it appear as though you're the aggressor, there should be no investigation into that. And to be clear, I'm not saying that this was initially an unjustified shooting by any stretch of the imagination, because I don't have all of the evidence there. But the idea that the evidence that we have is enough to conclude that it was justified is unbelievable. But it gets better. After finding out that there may be a possibility that the shooter might be criminally liable for the rounds fired after he picked up the assailant's weapon, Matt Walsh goes on to tweet the following. Probably true according to the letter of the law, but if I'm on the jury, there's no way I'm finding him guilty. We need to give enormous leeway to armed citizens who kill bad guys. It's the only way to restore some semblance of order to our cities. The criminals need to fear for their lives. Courts do everything in their power to be as lenient as possible on scumbag criminals. That's the grace that needs to be given to the citizens who fight back. In this case, hey, maybe the guy thought the robber might have a second gun tucked away. It's plausible, not guilty. Now, beyond the ludicrous notion that the US court system is too lenient overall, you know, the US court system in the country that makes up about 5% of the population, but about 20% of the prisoners, the idea that we need to give enormous leeway to armed citizens who kill bad guys is perhaps an appealing one to some people, because it would seem to be the case that you should be able to defend yourself in situations where somebody else presents some sort of a threat to you. And as a general rule, that's probably a good idea, although we're going to get into it a bit more in depth in a moment here. But that's not what Matt said, right? He didn't say we need to give enormous leeway to armed citizens who kill potential assailants. He said to armed citizens who kill bad guys. Now, as tempting as it is to just laugh at the idea that apparently Matt Walsh wants Batman to be real, the sentence, the criminals need to fear for their lives, is a genuinely chilling one. See, I was under the impression that when Matt Walsh says that he wants to defend and protect Western civilization, that also meant defending the values that Western civilization was ostensibly built on. The idea of a speedy and public trial, the idea of having a right to an attorney, the idea of, justice. But apparently not. And what's very interesting to me is the fact that he says that this policy is the only way to restore some semblance of order in our cities. So let's take a look at the data a little bit, shall we? So 14 states in the US enforce some sort of duty to retreat law, with the rest either having a stand your ground law or a de facto stand your ground law by judicial precedent. Of those 14 states, 11 are below the national average in violent crime, with Maine holding the title as of 2020 of being the least violent state in the union. 2020, of course, not being a fantastic year for crime in general. Looking at you, South Dakota. To break it down a bit more, New York City has a lower major felony rate, and that's how they measure crime over there. I don't fully understand it, than the entire state of Texas. You know, Texas, the state incredibly famous for armed citizens, and also the setting for an interesting situation we're going to touch on in just a moment here. It's always interesting to me how all of the tough on crime policies correlate with higher violent crime. But based on this, I hope we can conclude that Matt Walsh's claim that this is the only way to restore order to our cities is inane at best. If this were the only solution to our problem, you'd be able to find at least one shred of evidence. But let's take a closer look at stand your ground laws. We've already seen that they don't seem to be doing their job of restoring order, but it's worth taking a look at what they do in practice. It should come as no surprise that stand your ground laws have a very interesting and storied history of being racist. Based on 2013 data in the United States, which I know isn't perfect but should hopefully at least illustrate this point, a homicide in which a white person killed a black person is about 2.1 times as likely to be ruled as justified than a white person killing a white person, and about 5.6 times as likely than a black person killing a white person. Surprise! Note that, of course, the odds of a homicide being ruled as justified are markedly higher in stand-your-ground states than in non-stand-your-ground states, as you would expect. What this means in practice is that if you are a white person who wants to kill somebody and goes through with it, you can claim that you were in some way afraid for your life, and that might be enough reasonable doubt introduced into the case for you to get off scot-free. And of course, they're more likely to believe you if your victim was black. We saw that on full display after the murder of Trayvon Martin, but of course, it goes deeper than that, such as the case of Joe Horn. Now, Joe Horn was in his house when he saw two men attempting to burgle his neighbor's house and called 911. So far, so good. He told the 911 operator that he was interested in going out there and investigating and possibly shooting the two men, to which the 911 operator said 14 times, "For the love of God, don't do that. There is no reason for you to do that. Please leave this to the authorities." Joe Horn decided instead to go outside and shoot both men in the back. He was never arrested or indicted. In essence, for the brief case of Joe Horn, murder was just kind of legal. I've put links in the description, so you have the option to go back and take a look at several of these unbelievable stories, such as when two people almost got into a car accident, one of them screamed at the other, "Go back to Islam," and then shot the other man dead and was never indicted. And yeah, it shouldn't shock you that any time we implement any sort of tough on crime policy in the United States, it ends up being, in technical terms, giga racist. But what might shock you is Matt Walsh's follow-up tweet to this whole situation. In response to one commenter saying, "If something doesn't change regarding the lack of punishment for criminals, the next logical step is to extend legal deadly force to any violent attack and maybe even defense of property. I'm not advocating for this, but when people have had enough, something will have to give." Matt quote tweets, "I do advocate for it. Open season on violent criminals. Make examples of them. It's the only way to have any sort of order and justice in our communities." Now, as I hope we've established, the idea that this is the only way for us to have any sort of order or justice in our communities is legitimately asinine. But it's interesting to hear the reasons that Matt supports this policy. It's not because he thinks that people should have a right to defend themselves, or because sometimes you're put in a difficult situation and have to make decisions that may end up being irrational in the long run. No, he declares open season on violent criminals in order to make an example of them. Now, open season is a very interesting term to use. That's not a term we use when we discuss things like self-defense. Open season is when you lift restrictions on hunting. Apparently my dumb joke about Matt wanting Batman was not too far off from reality. What Matt Walsh is telling you right now is that he wants private, armed citizens to hunt down violent criminals and kill them to make an example of them for the rest of the world. It's hard to even give commentary on this beyond it's just fucking evil. I mean, what else is there to say? Matt's telling his followers to kill people. Now, I'm sure he's gonna do an episode on this, or maybe he already has, explaining how actually this is a common sense conservative position and it's ridiculous that he even got any sort of flack for it. But this, like if everything else that this man has said to you has not tipped off your alarms, like this should do it, right? This should be disqualifying. He's telling you, he's declaring open season on other Americans. Fuck, man. I don't know who needs to hear this today, but you have a right to due process. And yeah, our court systems are trash. And yeah, our police are responsible for a lot of this shit. But literally anything is better than this hellscape that Matt wants us to live in. It also shouldn't go without mentioning, I made a video on this recently. I would definitely recommend checking it out. I know I keep plugging this video over and over again, but I made it before I had like any amount of people following me, so I don't know, it's worth checking out, where I discuss how Matt Walsh and other conservative pundits have basically made an effort to give queer people death-warranting labels, to assign labels to them that make them deserving of death. The most obvious case being assigning the label of groomer to literally just any gay person, basically, especially if a person has like a pride flag in their freaking classroom. Now, of course, in the real world, a groomer is a violent criminal, and so it would stand to reason that that type of person would be the type of person that Matt Walsh wants you to hunt down and kill. And since there's apparently no agreed upon definition of what that very serious crime means, it kind of stands to reason that if your kid has a teacher with a pride flag, or a teacher who teaches health in the correct way, that is the type of person that it would be acceptable and under Matt Walsh's jury legal to shoot and kill. In essence, he's spent the last couple of years trying to assign the label of deserving of death to primarily queer people, and he's now giving you the death part. I don't know. I know to a lot of people it's like, it's not news that Matt just kind of like wants queer people dead and he's racist as shit, but like, I don't know, he's just kind of telling us now. It's every single month the mask has just kind of slipped further and further off, and at this point he's just not wearing it anymore, apparently at all. So I'm sorry. I wanted my next Matt Walsh video to be about how he went on a minor crusade against Legos, because I thought that might be funny, but looks like we're gonna have to save that one for a while. Yeah, follow me on Instagram at edgier-than-thou. Follow me on Twitter at edgier-than. Don't support shit like this. Don't defend this guy because he says other things that you agree with. Don't let this kind of shit slide. This is the reason why everyone's been calling him a theocratic fascist and why he feels the need to defend himself facetiously by putting it in his bio. It's because that's what he is. He wants people dead. Like, fuck. Oh my god. I hate that I feel the need to like explain this to people as though this doesn't speak for itself. But to some folks it doesn't. So yeah. I don't know. Peace out.